Hey guys, Desolator Magic back with another great video. This time I'm continuing the series about the Unwritten Rules of Magic. This time I'm covering a rule related to blue again because, well, it's my favorite color, of course. The color blue, of course, is probably the most hated color in all of Magic, although red and black aren't far off, but that's why the Unwritten Rules of Blue are so strictly enforced compared to the other colors. You wouldn't see an Avatar the Resolute style creature in blue. That creature is a ridiculous kick in the nuts to all of creature design and balancing, which actually kind of is green's thing. Back to blue though, blue creatures have an unwritten law similar to counterspells, which if you have no idea what I'm talking about, you might want to watch part 1 of the video where I talked about blue counterspells. Because blue controls the field with its spells, it would be way too powerful to have blue creatures that all had high attack power and double strike and sort of high combat abilities. They'd be pounding the enemy at the same time as controlling the field, and you just can't have that. So basically, because of this, the rule is that a blue creature cannot have a power higher than its mana cost without a ridiculously severe drawback. Usually when I tell people that, they think, oh, there's gotta be an exception, right? I mean, what about... Oh, wait, no. Oh, but what about... Oh, no, that has a downfall. Oh, but what about... Oh, no, that has a downfall. Seriously, there just aren't any creatures, although we will find out at the end of this video if there are any tiny exceptions to this rule, because there actually are. The most recent example of an extremely powerful blue creature that follows this rule is, of course, Frostwalker, one of my favorite creatures. If anything targets it, your spell, their spell, abilities, anything, if anything targets it, it dies. And then of course there's similar creatures like the fun-sized version, Phantasmal Bear, and who can forget about its weird cousin, the Crystalline Nautilus, that a grand total of nobody used. Once I've already stated that the creature simply can't have an attack power higher than its mana cost without a drawback, there's really not much more to explain about this unwritten rule. So, I thought I'd run down a list of some of the exception creatures, I guess you could say, because some of their drawbacks are quite funny or just outright insane. And I guess you can't really call them exceptions because they're actually perfect examples of the rules. They're the exception to the rule where the catch is enforced, I guess you could say. I found some of these pretty darn entertaining, and most people, they just have never heard of these creatures because, well, quite frankly, because of the drawbacks. So, hopefully you like this list too, because it's getting pretty weird from here on out. There is, for example, Drifter Eldal, which dies if you stop feeding it mana every single turn. Then, of course, there's Fairy Imposter, which requires bouncing another one of your creatures back to hand, which, of course, prevents a turn 1 casting. Then there's another one of my favorites, Dandan, or however the heck you say that card, aka Magikarp. Since nobody knows how to say it, we all just call it Magikarp at my LGS. Kinda looks like Magikarp. Kinda reminds me of it, except it can deal some damage. Well, as long as they own an island, I guess. Imaginary Pet is a classic, hilarious creature that only survives the round if you don't have a card in hand, which actually is pretty hard to do, or pretty hard to ensure happens repeatedly with blue due to counterspells. You can really only use them when your opponent makes you use them. Brackwater Elemental attacks or blocks just once and then blows itself up, so that's not very useful. And of course you can't forget the barely usable Dormant Gomazoa, which can't attack unless you basically wake it up every time. Then there's the borderline useless Esperzoa, which of course nukes artifacts until it blows itself up. Fog Elemental is another classic example of a creature that just is a single-use creature basically. It does something, then kills itself. Fog Elemental is about as sturdy as a bank of fog would be expected to be, so that actually fits. Now, so far this list has been pretty similar on the disadvantages, like it blocks once and dies, or if it's targeted it blows up, or something like that. But this one definitely takes the prize for the most unusual on the low end of the mana cost, at least. Hunted Phantasm is coming in hot to the battlefield with 5 goblins on its tail. Now, no wonder it's being pursued, as of course goblins are sticklers for proper unwritten rule compliance. A little bit of a lore bonus for you there. But next I have to mention one of the best examples of a perfectly workable disadvantage. It's the incredible 4/4 Flying Angel, Illusory Angel. All you have to do is basically trigger Surge and you've got yourself an Air Force. I do find that they commonly tend to pile up in my hand in sets of 2 or 3 with no way to cast them though. They're kind of cursed. I guess they're just generally unlucky. And, of course, if you took a Frostwalker and made it not be able to attack, you'd have Phantasmal Abomination. Definitely an abomination, I agree with the naming. Even better than Illusory Angel when it comes to lenient downsides, though, is the incredible mythic rare from Innistrad, the Scab Runator. In more updated terms, I guess you could say it's sort of like a mandatory Delve 6 cast cost with flashback creature, but I kind of still let it on the list, even though it has sort of an alternate cost in addition to its actual cost. It's still pretty darn lenient and pretty darn powerful. And there's another classic that I absolutely love, and that's Thassa, God of the Sea. It isn't technically a creature when you cast it, and it does require other permanents to be on the field in order to swing, but it's still quite unbelievably powerful. The card Vexing Sphinx is unbelievably stupid, as is the entire cumulative upkeep mechanic. It was one of the worst mechanics Wizards ever came up with. I can't even name one creature where it's worth it to pay the upkeep cost. Which, may I remind you, is cumulative, meaning it gets bigger every turn. Phantasmal Dragon is another classic illusion that dies if it's targeted, as is Phantasmal Beast. There's actually quite a few creatures like that. The list really only gets stranger from here when you get up into the high mana costs. There's of course Sky Swallower, the 8/8 Leviathan, and of course when it enters the battlefield, your opponent gains control of all permanents. Now is that until end of turn? No, it doesn't say that. Is that non-land permanents they're referring to? Nope, they get the whole breakfast buffet. Take a guess what the card ruling says about you getting your permanents back if this creature leaves the field. I didn't think I'd find a more suicidal creature than Inverter of Truth, but, well, here it is. Windwaiter is sort of a big version of Dandan. Then, of course, there's everyone's favorite, I'm just going to assume it's Norwegian, Jökulmordor? But I have no idea. You have to return 5 lands to hand, and the creature doesn't untap naturally on its own, but for 12/12 it actually usually is worth it, because, 12/12 is really decent. I guess they make the monsters really big in Norway. When the cast costs really go through the roof, the downsides start to get a little bit less severe, like for example, Supreme Exemplar. All you have to do is exile another elemental to bring it out, and that's it. Denizen of the Deep actually blows away every other creature you own, but that's only a problem if you actually control any other creatures. And of course there's the ridiculously stupid, classic original Leviathan. He can't do much of anything unless you nuke a ton of lands, and if you play him you pretty much just lost the game. Now at this point, you're probably wondering if there's even one single exception to this rule. After all the other colors break the rules all the time, right? I mean, that's usually why people are complaining about different cards, because they're just overpowered for the cost, or something like that. Well, there actually are 2, but don't get too excited about the first one. It's basically the jumbo jet of the Sphinxes, the Goliath Sphinx. It could be argued that the drawback is actually the fact that it's a Sphinx with no abilities whatsoever, which is actually incredibly rare, but that's the only potential downside. It does technically violate the rule with its attack power. The second one is actually pretty outrageous. Tromokratis has special advantages instead of downsides, so not only does it break the rule, but it breaks it and then some. The cast cost is pretty insane, but if you do get him out, nothing bad immediately happens. Well, except for to your opponent, of course. So that covers every single example of a high attack creature in blue with a downside, and the 2 exceptions, of course. It's pretty easy to see then why blue tends to mix in other colors in the deck to do any reasonable amount of damage. That, or it attempts to win by milling or building up to a huge creature with some sort of horrific set of abilities or properties, or something a little bit more advanced, I guess you could say, than bashing them in the face with giant jungle creatures like green does. Not that there's anything wrong with that. So of course I have to crown Tromokratis as the official king of blue. But I thought I was the king of blue. Oh my god, Battle of Wits, I freaking hate you! Well, that does it for this particular episode of Unwritten Rules. If you like the series, let me know down in the comment section. If you hate it, I'll just Photoshop Hillary Clinton's face onto some more cards. Either way, hit that subscribe button because there's some crazy crap coming down the line. And I will see you guys next video.